Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. My name is Simon Orley. I'm a professional triathlon coach. And recently I've celebrated 10 years of Phase On Triathlon. That's 10 years since I decided to leave the film industry and start my journey as a professional coach. I thought this would be a good opportunity to look back and to reflect on how I've changed, how triathlon has changed, how the sport has evolved, all of these different areas that I thought it would be good to to really look back and give sort of my early story for those of you who don't know, which I think is the majority of you, how it is that I first got started in triathlon. But if somebody sits there for 90 minutes waxing lyrical about themselves, that's going to get really quite tedious. So what I've done instead is I've got a friend along. So I've brought along a friend, Julian Ward, who I know from back in my time in London. He was also involved with the Wimbledon Windmilers, the triathlon club that I was a member of, and he's very kindly agreed to come on today to help me facilitate this conversation. So Julian, thank you very much for your time and welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast.
Thank you, Simon. Looking forward to it and exploring, revisiting a lot about your
Yes.
your history and what you've been up to, what you're planning to do.
Yeah, so I was actually obviously in the run up to this conversation, I was sort of reflecting back on kind of the experiences that we shared, all the things that we sort of when we were in the same area, working in the same club, what it is that we did, and I was reflecting. I always remember because there was a group of, for the most part, sort of five of us within sort of the triathlon arm of the club that came together as a bit of a sort of a subcommittee and tried to organise the Monday evening swimming and different events and the like. And
Yes,
I always thought to myself that you always came across as the voice of calm and reason. There
I'd
were
like I'd like to think so.
there was one of our group was very much sort of no nonsense. Two of our group, I think they could be a bit sort of like quite involved, but almost a bit too kind of emotional and fired up about things at times at the same time. But I always thought that and I was there as the kind of the young gun, but sort of the coach. You always that sort of that calm, like bring it together, voice of reason. And I thought, what a fantastic voice to have come along and help me tell my story.
Thanks, Simon. Well, actually, I remember my first real dealings with you, or even
Mm,
before that, before we were doing working as a group at the
mm.
Wimbledon Windmile and the swimming, especially. You worked at Sigma Sports, and I
Yes.
when I was buying a bike, and you gave me a lot of very calm, sensible advice when I was buying one of my first bikes
Mm.
for my age-related triathlons. I don't
Yes.
know if you can remember that far back.
I can. Yes, I remember. Yes, I do remember that
Sigma
that
Sport,
scenario. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Hampton Wick.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was me upstairs every Thursday and Saturday. I was there, helping people. I mean, I remember because like a friend of mine worked in sort of high-end outdoor clothing, and I said to him, "It's strange because I don't think of myself as being a salesy person." But yet I always hit my targets and like I seem to be getting on well in that environment. He goes, well, when you're in that kind of environment, you're not a salesperson. You're not ringing somebody up and not trying to sell them double glazing or solar panels or anything like that. You're a consultant. They've come to you because they're looking for advice on wetsuits and bikes and nutrition and clothing and shoes, and you're taking them through the different options. And I think that
I,
that's
I think that's what I particularly liked is that sort of that calm description of what the options were, finding out
Mm.
your circumstances,
Yeah.
but no pressure to sell. You know,
Yeah.
very traditionally British. I like to be in control of my own choosing, and
Not, yeah,
I thought you did that very well.
yeah, and people don't like being sold to. They don't like the feeling that they're being like put on the spot and someone's trying to get them to sign on the dotted line or sign up to some questionable finance deal or something like that. And you get a much more, in my mind at least, by actually building a relationship with someone, making them feel heard, making them feel understood, rather than kind of here I am, this is the best, this is what I do. And from the research that I've done for like building my own business, you see advice online about these things. And I could never imagine myself talking to a potential client like that. Really
Mm.
trying to like pin them down, get the arm behind their back to get the sale over the line. Yeah, it's unthinkable to me personally.
It's not good in the long run.
I
And
guess
and
it's a bit different if you're trying to sell somebody some double glazing, whereas with coaching, I am the product. Like if you
yes.
don't like me, it's not a case of I'll just sign up to get this guy off my back. It's no, you're signing up to talk to me like on a regular basis for the foreseeable future. And you want to make sure that you're somebody that somebody thinks, what, I feel that I can trust him and I feel that he listens to me.
Mm. So touching on when you said we all, so there was that group of us at Wimbledon
Mm,
Windmilers. Uh, I got into triathlon because it was a jogging club that was very close to where I
mhm.
lived. So I
Yep.
was initially a runner,
Mm,
not a fast runner, but a runner. And then there was a session to try out the swimming,
mm.
which was relatively minor at the club at the time. Um, and I quite liked that. Then there was something called the Thames Turbo Sprint Triathlon.
Yes.
I tried one of those and I thought, yeah, this is great. And after then, I went out, bought my first wetsuit,
Got them
and
both.
basically had discovered the world of triathlon and
Mm.
went from there. How about you, Simon? How did you first get into triathlon?
Well, I guess I'm quite unusual because a lot of coaches, in my experience and what I've read of bios and you see and you read things, they come from a background of elite sport. So they grew up in this sort of, almost sort of a bubble of elite sport sometimes. They competed at a high level, studied sports science, and they maybe even be on a performance pathway at some point. Some of them professional athletes, and they find themselves on this pathway, and they think, right, what I want to do is I want to help other athletes. Very good, very noble, all very good. But I only discovered triathlon at the tender age of 22, which in many ways is quite late compared to a lot of other people who were in my job, in my position. And at the time, I had just moved to London. It was January 2012. I'd landed a job in the film industry on a project that was running for about 6 weeks. And I looked into different options of accommodation, and I realized that actually the sort of the most economical option was for me to actually to rent a room for those 6 weeks rather than look into commuting or hotels or trains or something like that. And you can tell I'm sort of aging it here. It was £70 a week I spent for that room in London, down in Wimbledon, Colliers Wood area. So I went and I did this job, this 6 week job. And at the time, I wasn't in like a great place personally in my life. A girl was involved. I was feeling a bit adrift. I decided to stay in London. I was offered an extension on the tenancy on the room, so I decided to stay in London and make this career in the film industry work. But I was still feeling a bit adrift, lost, purpose. Because in the film industry, it's on a contracting basis. So I had 6 weeks of intense work, and then you find yourself kicking heels until the phone rings again. And I felt myself really lost, because I didn't know anyone. I had no friends, no family, no contacts. Just headed to London to sort of to pursue this dream that I had. And I remember waking up one day and thinking, I don't want to sit around playing Xbox in my room for the third day in a row. Like, what can I do to make myself feel better? What can I do to make myself feel good? I thought, well, you always enjoy swimming, that you always feel better after a swim. And my idea of swimming was like a few lengths of heads up breaststroke, having a rest at the end of each, being very casual, very relaxed. I mean, one of the reasons that I didn't really do much front crawl is my parents called me the windmill when they were teaching me to swim. I didn't have formal swimming lessons. My parents did their best to teach me, bless them. Um, but because the timing of my stroke was at such that I didn't bend my arms, and it was like it was just turning over so fast. As you see from a number, you go down to a pool, and there's going to be at least somebody doing that.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get my head around it. So I thought I'd go swimming. So I looked at pools in the area, and the one that's closest to me was Merton Abbey, and that was once upon a time a Virgin Active. And I thought, oh, but they got but it's only going to be membership, isn't it? But I thought, well, let's go down there. Let's have a look. Let's have a chat. So I went down there, had a chat to them, and they did a special offer for under 25s, and it was really very reasonable. The membership. Thought I could do unlimited swimming and have access to the gym. So I went down and I got a membership and I mainly did swimming and it made me feel really good. It made me feel, alive, like I had some sort of sense of purpose, which I think a lot of people listening to this will also relate to because triathlon has given them that sense of purpose where they felt that, it was just their job or they felt they spent all their life looking after their children. But suddenly when you do something for yourself, something like triathlon, you go, I'm going to go on this journey. It really captivated me. And I remember I walked up to the gym one day. Now, the gym, I didn't feel nearly so much. But, I felt, oh, I'll do a little bit. I kind of, at the time, despite the fact, I've hovered around sort of 55 kilos for most of my life, had the idea, oh, I can put on some muscle if I go up in the gym, despite having no idea what I was doing, no idea about the nutrition. I just kind of felt, a lot of people go on this journey. It's like you almost like your New Year's resolution type mindset. Go to the gym a few times a week and then slowly fall out of the habit and stop. But I walked up onto the gym floor to try and, entertain myself one day. And there was a sign at the top of the stairs saying, try a triathlon. And it was a gym-based triathlon. And they actually did it with a ride on the exercise bike. I think it was like 12 kilometers, 2.5 run on the treadmill, and then you go down and you finish off in the pool because they didn't want us getting the equipment wet. I mean, I just
Ah,
neutralised it personally, let's giving somebody time to dry off and then come upstairs and jump on the bike and the run, but that's me. But I really suddenly felt this sense of purpose, this draw towards this. It wasn't something that had like, appealed to me. It was early 2012, the Olympics, but the Olympics wasn't actually what really drew me into triathlon. It was more just the idea of having this purpose. I thought, well, I can swim in that I can do a bit of breaststroke. I always enjoyed riding a mountain bike around the lakes where I grew up, gravel lakes, Cotswold Water Park. And I'm sure I can teach myself to run. So that was my rationale for taking on this triathlon. I started training for it. So I started buying books. I got 220 magazine. And I really started doing my research. And I trained and I trained. And by the time that I actually got to the point where I felt that I was ready for an event, it was already the end of the season. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm doing 2013. I didn't do the race in the pool because I felt, no, I'm so invested in this journey. I want to cross a proper finish line. I want to do a proper race rather than just do this timed activity in a gym. So I trained. I taught myself front crawl without a coach. I didn't have the resources, didn't have the money for a coach. Taught myself to run, joined the Wimbledon Win Miler, discovered that actually I was all right at running. Actually, I was quite good. I still remember myself running down the side of the what's the river that runs through Merton? I've forgotten. Um,
um, Wandle, the
that's
River
right, running
Wandle.
down the Wandle Path and just feeling this that my lungs just having no oxygen inside them and seeing all these people go straight past me and thinking, how do you run? Like, how does this work? How can I like not feel exhausted after a few minutes? And going on that journey of self-discovery, and because I worked on a contractual basis on the film industry, job to job, I had plenty of time in my downtime to research, to learn how bikes work, to learn about the human body, to already invest in learning what it is I needed to know. And I was very lucky in that respect. But I then started training, set my sights in this triathlon, and the first race I did was the Womble Triathlon that was run by Sophie back in 2013. And I remember I got myself a brand new specialized alley like 10 days before from Evans Cycles. I really maxed out my overdraft. I went, no, this is it. I'm going to get the bike for the race. This means everything to me. And when I crossed that finish line, all the my self-esteem shot through the ceiling. All of the kind of the anxiety and the depression that I was suffering. I'm not going to say it evaporated immediately, but I felt this enormous weight off of my shoulders. I just felt like I'd really achieved something. I'd become someone rather than being somebody who's adrift. and sort of stuck in this strange place without a purpose, without a community. I suddenly felt like I really belonged somewhere, not only within the sport of triathlon, but within the windmilers. And by completing this race and with that medal around my neck, I remember riding down Wimbledon Hill with all my gear in my rucksack on my bike and the medal flapping around and just thinking like, wow, like this is incredible. And I then went on and I started doing a bunch of other races. I then the next race was open water, so I got myself a wetsuit, and then I got myself a tri suit a few months later. It really was very low resources. I really didn't have very much money at all to dedicate onto this journey, and so it took me a long time to cure all the kit, to build it through the distances, and to do all the races. But it just absolutely captivated me.
Wow. And of course, this is before you were coaching, of
Oh,
course.
yes, yes. In I sort of fell in love with triathlon, and the more time that I spent learning about triathlon, the more time that I spent learning about the human body and all of this, the less I had an interest in the film industry. Now, I got into the film industry. I went to film school in Bournemouth, got a degree in cinematography. I worked on like Downton Abbey, and some other relatively big stuff. And, I really got into the film industry because you go to the cinema and you walk out. I mean, the age that I was, a film like Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, at the time when these were like these huge cinematic events. And you come out of the cinema and you think, wow, like that was such an incredible experience. Like being part of that. Like, even though it was just a small cog in that machine that created that, that's what I want to do with my life. So my GCSEs, my A levels, they were all tilted towards film production. Went to university, got the degree, moved to London, and I made so many sacrifices personally, with relationships, all of this in pursuit of the film industry. Because I found myself, although I got a degree in cinematography, I soon realised that my strength was in the lighting rather than the camera side of things. So really pursued the lighting route. But the I was very much a outlier in the world of lighting. I'm sure a lot of people in the industry would agree with me that the lighting team tends to be quite salt of the earth, would be the polite way of putting it. I didn't share a lot of values with them, views around women, for instance. And I tried to make my own like path, tried to work as a head of department. So rather than being responsible to someone whose values I didn't align with, I instead sort of put myself, I worked as the head of the department underneath the director of photography, who was normally a privately educated, well-to-do type of person. And that worked quite well for me. And apparently I had very good skills when it came to sort of working around actors and being subtle about things but efficient. And I had the skills to be a head of department. But as the time went by, I had less and less interest in the film industry because you realise that that moment when you walk out the cinema and you go, "Wow, that is incredible," bears absolutely no resemblance to standing alone in the middle of a field in January when it's pissing it down and 3 degrees in January and sat there waiting for your name to come over the radio that they need you. I did 24-hour shifts. I did projects I didn't get paid for. I did some truly amazing work, but I then the next day you'd be sat there in somebody's kitchen in East London making a commercial about washing powder. And it was that blowing hot and cold. It was that stark reality of what life in the film industry actually meant. And I fell out of love with the film industry and I fell more in love with triathlon every day. Um, and I remember thinking to myself when I go out on my bike rides, I'm dreading going back onto set, but I've given so much. I've dedicated 8 years of my life to this journey. I'm now actually at the point. I mean, I think I was earning like several £1,000s a week by the end, on these projects that I was on. I'm thinking, I can't turn my back on this. And then I'll be on a film set and think, I just want to go work in a bike shop. And it was a really difficult I felt really conflicted. And then I got a call up to go and work on a film called God's Own Country, which actually did quite well. A few of you might have seen or heard of it. And I went up to Yorkshire, and I was up in Yorkshire. It was a like two and a half month shoot, I think. And it was the 10-hour days, excluding lunch. So 11 hours. So really quite short days in the film industry. On location, put up in a reasonable hotel. We were on a farm, beautiful part of the world. It was everything that I wanted from life in the film industry, like a good script. And I was still finding myself watching the clock. And I was still thinking, when can I go home? And I think it like this isn't promising. Like it's not encouraging. Like I'm only 26. Like how long can I keep this up for? But I was earning good money. Anyway, so I had partway through that shoot, I got a message from a friend of mine. He said, "Hi Simon, would you be able to look at my running and help me with my running?" And I never even thought about helping anyone with their running. Never even crossed my mind. But I thought to myself, well, why shouldn't I? Like I know quite a bit. So I said, yeah, okay, sure. Like let's do that. And she said, oh, will £40 suffice? I thought, well, I hadn't thought about charging her for it. So she said, yeah, sure, okay, I'll have a look at, I'll go and I'll do like a bit of I can go and have a look at your run and sort of give you some pointers. Anyway, I had quite a fractious relationship with my boss on that job, in that he, being a head of department, the people who were what we called the grown-ups, who they only made 2 or 3 films a year because they were so heavily invested in the film. Whereas I was moving from set to set to set to set to set. He was quite new and he felt that I wasn't dedicated enough to the project when it was hard to sort of explain to him, look, this is the 12th project that I've worked on this year. And I can't maintain that level of enthusiasm. And just because I'm not there hanging on your every word by your side every second of every day doesn't mean that I don't care. But he felt that was that way, and because he came from the States, and so I think there's a little bit of a different mindset. So anyway, I got a call on one of the days off, and it was the producer, and he goes, "Look, Simon, it's not working out." I was like, "Okay, like it's not a surprise." And he goes, sorry, and it's not you. I think it's just sort of it's just the two of you. You don't quite click. It's like that's all right, no problem. So I said I'll come grab I go grab my kit from the back of the van, and because it was the only 2 weeks before the end of the project, and I got a week's severance pay, I actually ended up quids in the in the long run. It felt like so. I remember I turned up, hopped onto the van, got all my gear off the lighting track, all my personal possessions, and the producer said to me, "Thank you for making this easy. I'm not making this too hard." I remember thinking, but I'm kind of happy that I'm leaving. I got in the car, drove back to London from Yorkshire, and on this journey, I just came to the realization I'm done. Like I can't keep doing this. Like it's not exciting me. It's not. I've lost my passion for making films. And then I thought, well, what else could you do with your life, Simon? You don't really want to work in a bike shop for your whole life. And then I remembered what my friend had asked me. They said, can you help me with my triathlon? I thought, well, what if I dedicated my life to helping other people achieve what I've done through triathlon, going on that same journey from taking them from being, not always in a bad place, but quite often somebody who's struggling, with mental health, low self-esteem, lack of purpose, something like that, and discovering something like triathlon and really sort of helping them sort of not have to spend all those years making all of the errors that I did. If you can hold their hand, explain to them these things, because you come into triathlon as somebody who doesn't know anything about the sport, and you hear people talk about gear ratios, different tires, different like thicknesses of wetsuit. And you sit there and you go, how am I supposed to know this? I thought, but if I can share with people, if I can help them sort of fill in the gaps in their knowledge, by helping them work. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what the vehicle was going to be. I just knew that I wanted to help people sort of complete triathlons, and that's how I became a coach. I just decided one day.
So when you when you first I'm going to help people, and
Mm.
obviously I think was it triathlon level one was your first coaching course?
No, it
Uh,
wasn't. So because I decided it was March when or early April, I think, when I was let go from this film. And I thought to myself, well, let's have a look at what the education opportunities are. And British Triathlon, they only run their education in the off season. So it's a September to March thing. So I'd no chance to get the qualification. So I thought, well, I've got to get some kind of qualification. Like, I don't want to be one of these dodgy geezers, who's just from the school of hard knocks, school of life. And so the first qualification I took was the Ironman Certified Coach course. So this was an online certification that you do through Ironman, and people say it's a sort of a pay to play type thing. Now I remember at the time finding the course really quite useful, covering areas such as nutrition that I didn't have a fantastic grasp of at the time. Like I knew about swim technique, I knew about bikes, I knew about physiology, but when it came to areas such as strength training and nutrition, I found that really helpful. And so that was the first course that I did, and I started my British Triathlon level one in the September of that year.
Oh, fantastic. And then I do remember you swept through those courses, didn't you? Level one, level two, which is the big step.
Yes, yes.
Um, and that's when you did a lot. You sort of became club swimming coach effectively at Windmilers.
Yes, the
Um,
the coach that we were working under previously, he moved down towards Waterlooville, I think it was, down towards Portsmouth. And so and we were trying to find a replacement, and all of the replacement coaches that we got in felt didn't really gel with the swimmers. I remember this one coach came along and asked the swimmers to start swimming butterfly. Now that's we've already told you that they can only swim front crawl. You're not really listening, even at this early stage when you're supposed to be trying to impress us. And because I was doing my level two at that point, and I had to lead a series of four linked sessions as part of my assessment. So I led four sessions, and we all had a conversation. People, well, should Simon just like if we can't find anyone better, could Simon take over? And of course, I enjoyed the mentorship of working under another coach. But I think because we couldn't find anyone more suitable, I think we just kind of, well, let's see how we get on.
yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and about the same time before you did your level three, which
Mm,
is I know the high performance one, you took on a massive task, and having been involved with it myself in the past, that very first thing that attracted you, the one ball triathlon, you
yes.
took that on, and
I Yeah, that
you were
was
the event director.
a trial by fire, I think is the best way to describe that experience. Um, because sort of Sophie did fantastic work getting the race up off the ground, and I knew that if I came in, the course was already there, the risk assessments were already there. Everything was already in place. Obviously, you have to come in, things change from year to year and that, but I didn't have to build out from scratch. But because that finish meant so much to me, the idea of it disappearing when I could step in and save it broke my heart. And because I had time and it was triathlon related to the industry, I thought, well, I'll have a crack. And I think anybody who has never organised an event doesn't appreciate just how much goes into it. And bear in mind, this was while I was juggling working at Sigma, working as a swimming teacher, because I started off delivering face-to-face swim coaching sessions with people who couldn't even put their face in the water, but they wanted to swim. And I felt helpless to help them. So I did a swim teaching qualification to help understand how it is that you can help somebody who's a non-swimmer sort of get confident in the water, and then you can build up into the more coaching level of things. But yeah, alongside my swim teaching, alongside working in the bike shop, alongside running the business, I took on this task of the Womble Triathlon. And it took a hiatus for a couple of years because there was a misunderstanding with the chip timing company, and they ended up giving us a massive bill. And the committee of the Windmilers, the main club, got very much cold feet about the idea. But I brought it back on the strict understanding that I had to at least break even or make a small profit, which I think I put a bit too much pressure on myself to do that, to be honest. Again, I was young, I was about 28, 27. And it's a big job organizing a triathlon. I wouldn't say I was the youngest race director ever, but I can't be far off. And
I think you say, I mean, having organised one or two events
mm,
myself, that you said that people underestimate just how difficult it is because triathlon is actually quite a technical sport in that you have the bikes,
Hmm.
you need marshals out on a course, you
Yes.
need transition equipment for that, you need timing, you need supervisors on the swimming. There is a lot to it.
There's a lot, and you're also communicating with British Triathlon because they send a representative down to referee. You've got the local community, of course, because if you're going to have, because the venue that we use, the access is through a very quiet cul-de-sac. And you have to, of course, then, so I like hand delivered and signed letters to all of the residents apologising for the disruption, what time was going to be, what time we were going to finish. And I got responses from some of the residents because I gave them my number and email if they had any questions and sort of having to negotiate, with it. And there's like so many moving parts. And you've also got are we going to sell enough tickets? And you sort of log in and see if you've got any more entries overnight, and you think, oh no, we're really coming close. But there's always that surge, like a week before, when people who've been putting it off or like been shopping around and suddenly sort of discovered it will jump in and sign up. And we did manage to make a profit of a couple of £100, I think it was, for the club, which was nice. But I probably should have spent more on making the day a little bit more. So get like a nice finishing arch rather than some cones and that. I just remembered as well because we didn't want it because we couldn't do chip time. We had Jeff who was sat there on a table with these pieces of paper making notes of all the splits as each athlete like entered and left transition and people like helping out and calling things out as well. And I had to transcribe
Yeah,
that all into a results document and send it out in the days after.
yeah. I mean, and sadly, I think what was learned from that it didn't continue much into the future because
Mm.
they could find volunteers, but not somebody to take on that particular task.
Yes, that was a
Uh,
monumental task.
Monumental task, and so and then after was it soon after that you did your level three?
No. So, because the year that I took over the Womble, I think that was 2018. I think that's spring 2018 that I took on the Womble. Maybe 2017. Now, the because it's I did my level two in 2017 because I went straight from late 2016. So went from level one straight into level two. There was about like a week between the two. 2017, and then you had to have 2 years of coaching before you
Mm.
could apply for the level three. So I applied for level three and I got in. And my in 2019, I then had enough experience to get into the next cohort. And I got in with my course due to start in February 2020. And that didn't happen.
Oh yeah, for obvious reasons, yeah. Because
Yes.
I mean, and for my edification, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners, I mean, what is the practical difference between level two and level three? What I know it's called high performance
Mm,
coaching, but
yeah.
what actually does that?
So your level one is kind of well, it was originally meant to be as an assistant, but I think that the landscape of the sport changed when they realised actually no, we need to give these people the autonomy to lead sessions. So I was the first cohort of the new level one, which allows you to run sessions under the supervision of a level two coach. So the level two coach has to write the session and has to sign off the risk assess. And the level two coach is taking responsibility for the session. But you as a level one coach, you can turn up on poolside and you can deliver that session. Whereas the level two, it's much more about the big picture. It's about how to link sessions together, how to work on certain aspects. It's about
Mhm.
much more to do with the seeing athletes as individuals rather than pieces of meat. It is, but it's very much a club coaching role. It's how to lead a club coaching environment. Whereas the level three has always been much more about one-to-one coaching. Now, the old level three, which was ran up to around about 2018, that was much more like you go away, you do a case study, you coach an athlete, and you come back and you report on that. When I started the high performing coach program, it was much more about self-reflection, analysis, emotional intelligence, soft skills, and things like that. Because I think who the course was designed for is high performance athletes who want to turn their hand to coaching. But this is British Triathlon trying to say, look, you can have the best swim sets in the world. Okay, you can know everything there is to know about cellular biology and how we respond to exercise. But here's how to actually talk to athletes. Here's how to actually get the most out of them. And that was sort of the main difference. There wasn't like a big assessment in the same way. It was more a series of workshops, team building exercises, lots of like self-reflection models, and at the end you give a presentation about your personal development sort of over the journey. And it kind of I was a bit disappointed in a way because I was hoping to get into a bit more kind of nuts and bolts. I always felt that the more kind of emotional intelligence side of things, being able to like have a difficult conversation with someone, manage people, things like that, always felt like one of my stronger aspects, and I was actually weaker in the more sort of the more technical area, side of things. But yeah, that's the broad aspect. It becomes more and more about the coach as the athlete as an individual as you move through those levels.
Because there's such a wide range of coaches out there. I mean,
Yes.
so the spectrum, of what is coaching in the triathlon environment,
Mm.
as you say, there's almost like the technical coaching, then there's the sort of strategic
Hmm.
and mental approach coaching.
Yes.
Um, have people who are very good at communicating. You've got people who've done it before. I mean, if you're out there, how do you assess, you know, this? It's a bit like when you very first bought a mobile phone or something,
Mm.
or where do I start? How do I
Yeah.
assess?
So I
Uh,
again I just had this desire to help people. I didn't know quite how I was going to do that, but I think you can agree that the thing that most triathletes need the most help with is their swimming. Is
yeah,
their they have those they have that lack of technical knowledge in many cases. Because a lot of parents they will give their children swimming lessons because it's an important life skill. And they'll get to the point where they can see their children swimming front crawl with their face in the water and turning their arms over and go, my child can swim, pull them out the swimming lessons. And the downside to that is that they never really actually pick up the technique and the finesse. They're very kick heavy because the first thing you teach a child to do in the water to propel themselves is to kick. So they're very kick heavy. Their arms are just sort of spinning around, not doing a huge amount. And so helping people become water confident, helping them refine their swim technique is where I sort of really sort of started out. And running sort of sneaky sessions at local leisure centres and tooting back Lido, giving people feedback on their stroke and helping them, and they paid me for my time doing that. But when I did the Ironman certified coach course, it made me realize how much more there is to triathlon than that. Obviously, I always knew that swimming was never the whole picture. But when it came to creating the right training plan, when it came to, like I said earlier, like strength and nutrition and like the bike data and all of this, it made me realize that actually if you have somebody who spends an hour with you on your techniques, if you go along to a Monday night swim session, okay, and a coach gives you a piece of feedback on your technique, you go, oh, that's really useful, thank you. That is great. That is good. Is much better than having nothing. But if you have somebody who has written a training plan that's built around you for that week, if you have somebody who can answer your questions, somebody who can help you with your nutrition, your recovery, your sleep, and is focused on rather than just focusing on that 1 hour a week. If you have somebody who's overseeing the entire week of training, rest, recovery, someone who's there as like almost a project manager, overseeing the development of the athlete from where they are to where it is that they want to get, problem solving along the way. That to me, that felt
What
like
you've
much more my calling.
and for what you just said there, Simon, I mean, to me personally, for my own realization, but seeing it in others, the underestimation of how important things like nutrition is,
Mm,
making sure that you give yourself the appropriate rest time.
mm,
Um, it seems to be a feature of a lot of people, as you say, they suddenly get massively into triathlon
mm.
and they almost can't control
Yes,
their
yes.
urge to do as much as possible.
Mm.
And it's about doing it wisely. And is that what you're really trying to help to do? To
So this is one, I think, the big misconceptions with coaching is that people think that a coach is there to push you to your limits and to work you really hard. When actually I spend far more time holding athletes back than I do pushing them hard. Because, and this has to come with communication. You have to ask, check in with the athlete. How are you feeling? What are you up to? How can I, like, where are we at the moment? What is it that we need? I'd like to focus on this. What do you think? You have that back and forth communication to make sure that you're not undercooking it too much. But so many athletes, they'll sign up to an Ironman 10 months out and they go hard in their training. I'm going to be an Ironman. And they immediately start putting in these half marathon length runs, heading out doing these really long rides, swimming every day, really going hard into their training. But you can't go in that hard. You will get injured if you keep pushing yourself like that. You will end up burnt out, overly fatigued. There are all sorts of health complications that can come from that. And that enthusiasm, that drive to achieve this event is fantastic, but it's about tempering that. And it's helping somebody understand not only slow down, do less, we need to pace ourselves, but also helping them understand look, we need to pace ourselves now because this is what's going to be happening in 6 months' time. Okay. I'm going to be putting you through about 16, 17 hours a week of training. And I need you to be ready for that. I can't have you like exhausted after 3 months of training. Um, yeah.
if I could give a story that somebody will both know, we both swam at Shepperton Lake, and there was a
Mm,
gentleman there called Malcolm who
mm,
used to be called
mm. Yes.
Lake. And was talking to him about somebody had asked him for informal advice, not formal, not good, not. But they were aiming for an Ironman, and he's and one of the people who was asking his opinion said,
Mm.
"There's a half Ironman 3 weeks before. Should I do that?" And he
Yeah.
said, "No, it's too close."
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, "But I'll do it, but I won't push it." Um, and
A
of
tale as old
course,
as
you
time.
probably know he did the half Ironman, and of course got carried away.
Yes.
Did the best half Ironman of his and but then come the actual Ironman, which was his true target, he
Yeah.
bombed because he
Yeah. Yeah.
just didn't have the recovery time. So
Yeah.
is that something that you experience as
Yes.
you see people do?
A huge amount. I remember I can't even remember his name. I'm not just giving him anonymity here. I can't remember his name, but he was one of the swimmers who came along sometimes on a Monday night. And I said to him, um, you know what? I'm going to let the dog in the room because she's going to get upset by not being able to come in the room. So come on, Poppy. I think you'll be a little more. There we go. Otherwise, there we go. She likes to be included when I'm recording podcasts. Um, so yeah, there's a chap who came along Monday evenings to the Windmiler sessions, and I said to him, "How did the Ironman go?" And he said to me, "Well, I just I didn't want to be there." He said, when I actually got there, I did really poorly. And my bike was nowhere near where it needed to be. I walked most of the run. Like I just didn't want to." And I had a chat with him about his training, what it is that he'd done, and all this. I tried to, sort of put it to him in a gentle way because I was just the swim coach. I said, do you think you might have got a bit carried away with your with all the rest of your training? And he said, I think he had like a moment of realization, like, yeah, I think you're right. I think I did too much too soon. By the time that I turned up at this Ironman event, I was just completely like I was over it. And it's getting that balance right. Because if you go too hard too soon, you can't maintain that level of training, you're going to have an experience like that. But if you leave it too late, if you soft pedal it, then the athlete's going to get frustrated because they don't feel that they're improving. And they're going to have an underwhelming performance. And so the way that you actually really achieve this balance is with communication with your coach. And it's about that feedback loop. It's about, oh, I feel this is really working. I feel this isn't working. There's all sorts of like important, sometimes difficult conversations you need to have with athletes to try and work out where it is that you are. And that's, again, I like to stick up warm up races in the calendar, albeit not 3 weeks before, but to give people an idea of, where their training is. Ideally about sort of 6 weeks or so from their big event. So if they do their first race day in anger and they realize actually their bike is nowhere near where it needs to be, then we've got time to turn that around. So it's that real kind of like exploratory side of things to really try and eat these things out. But these are the kind of things that no matter how good you are, no matter how knowledgeable you are, nobody can work that out for themselves. You can only ever discover these things from conversations
Well,
with someone else.
elite athletes in nearly every discipline have a coach for that reason. Who,
Yeah.
I yeah, I mean, that is fascinating. And how do you balance? You talk about communication and
Mm.
conversations, and then data. If you're when you're sort of coaching somebody,
Yeah.
you need to see things need to be measurable as well.
Yes.
How does that come into it?
So this is one of the biggest shifts in my coaching. Is that when I first started out, and when you do the courses and you have the information, British Triathlon not so much, but the courses I did with Ironman and Training Peaks and that teach you how to build sort of a program. Because British Triathlon is much less about how to coach an athlete, what sessions to do. And it's much more about making sure they're safe, making sure they're well struck, all of this. So when I looked at and I learned about pace, zones, heart rate, all of these metrics, I think that there's something that appealed to me being a bit of a kind of a numbers person about you can create this perfect training plan where you spend this many hours a week in this training zone, in this many hours a week doing this, and you can then analyze what it is that people are doing. And you can then be able to get an idea of where they are, see what their heart rate is doing relative to their pace, and get all of these insights. But I think, especially over the COVID period, where we weren't training for races in the same way. I mean, some of us were training but looking back now, it seems incredibly naive. But people who were training in sort of the summer of 2020, hoping that by September that the races would be reopened. So they did some of that, but a lot of the time it was more training for fitness, enjoyment, health, all of these. In fact, I know somebody who did a solo Ironman. He just went and did the distances on his own. And so yes, but over the years, partly due to the British Triathlon qualifications that I did, I've moved from being more data focused because I've realised that no matter how good a plan is that's written, things are always going to go wrong. Things are always going to get in the way, whether it's illness, whether it's childcare, whether it's injury, whether it's a wedding. Like life just happens. We're not robots and we can't afford to treat people like robots. And so I still go in and I still will look at the data. I will still do deep dives into the data, but the deep dives that I do into the data these days, I generally save a bit more for those who are more performance focused athletes. So if somebody says, I want to go sub 10 for an Ironman or I want to qualify for the World Championships, then I will spend more time going into the data and trying to pull up these reports and sharing the data with them because they've been in the sport long enough to be able to understand that data. And I'll of course educate them if they're not familiar, but to go in and to show them what their power curve is and to create these in-depth race plans and talk about all of this like really like sort of deep level like really sort of using all of my skills and experience to help them. And then On the flip side, if someone is just training for their first 70.3, I try not to drown them in data. I try not to go in and to read into things too much. Because whereas if you take an elite athlete, a successful athlete, and you say to them, your heart rate really increases towards the end there, like what do you think has caused that? Or, do you think you might be what was your feeling like? You try to find why it was that the heart rate increased. They'll come back and they give you a thoughtful answer. If somebody's a bit new to the sport and they go, oh, your heart rate looks like it increases at the end there, they immediately will either get a bit defensive or panicky. Oh, my heart rate shouldn't be doing that. What happened? What was wrong? And so I tend not to go into the weeds of the data as much with people who are sort of stepping up to do something for the first time. Obviously, I'll share what it is that they need to know so they can follow the devices, follow the workouts that I give them, so that when they look at a session, they understand what the benefit of that session is. And I have created a bunch of educational content for athletes who sign up to my programs to read. So they can understand all about the physiology of exercising at different intensities and the more scientific side of nutrition. That's all there. But if I'm working with somebody on a one-to-one basis, I've realized that it's far more important to make sure that you keep that rapport, that positive rapport with you as a coach, that they feel that you're listening to them and that you're telling them what they want to hear most of the time. Sometimes, of course, you do need to sit down and have a bit of a chat and go, look, if we want to do this, this needs to change. But for the most part, it's about really making sure that they feel they're being listened to, they're being looked after. But for those who are more elite, those who are working at a higher level, that is when I will start to roll out the advanced fitness testing and maybe look at going to a lab and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, one question I didn't ask, I meant to, is for
Mm,
you to sort of comment on in-person versus online
mm,
coaching.
yes.
There's no one size fits all,
No.
but there's obviously a balance. And what you think of that and where you sit on that spectrum.
Yeah. So I would say personally that for someone who is just starting out, then in person is a good place to start. So if you can't swim or you really struggle in the swim, then getting yourself an in-person coach is the fastest way to improve. Because I know an awful lot about swim technique. Again, I'm not a bona fide swimming coach. There are plenty of swimming coaches who are better than me, but I know enough. I've delivered thousands of hours on poolside coaching people with swimming technique. But if you go and you have somebody on poolside with you who watches you swim and goes, hey, you know what? Just lift that elbow up a little bit and see how that feels. And you can give somebody constant feedback over 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. That's far more efficient than somebody sending me a video of their swimming than me sending them a set, and that kind of it's a slightly clunkier feedback loop. Now, I remember back in 2018, a chap hired me and it came through, where are you based? Syria. And at the time, Syria was a dangerous place to be. And it turns out that he was an aid worker who was stationed in Syria, but he wanted to do a triathlon in Lebanon. And so he hired me, but he couldn't really swim. And there were no coaches in Syria. So we had this online relationship where he'd send me videos of him swimming at this like 20-meter pool that he'd managed to find. And I would feed back on that and he'd go back. And then I'd like help him transition to open water. And so whilst I can help people with items that are traditionally in person remotely, realistically, I would prefer if somebody is just starting out that they hire a local swim coach, even if it's just for a couple of sessions, to have a look at their technique and to see how to improve. But beyond swim technique, I think that online coaching really is the way to go. Because again, maybe you might want somebody to show you how to cycle safely, teach you how to use the brakes, how to use the gears, all of that. But running, like your body will find the most efficient way to run. If you do the strength exercises, if you do sort of the drills and you do all of these other bits, then your body will just sort of naturally find. If you look at the top flight runners, especially in triathlon, they'll all have slightly different running techniques. There isn't this perfect running technique. So the value for me of paying somebody £50 an hour to sit at the side of the track and, watch you go around while shouting encouraging words, it's sort of questionable when you could get a plan that could take you all the way into your race for about £50. And it's overseeing every aspect of somebody's training, overseeing the nutrition, the strength, the training plan, the rest, the recovery, the sort of managing illness, managing injury, all of those really difficult bits, which is where people come unstuck. Being able to swim with a beautiful stroke is fantastic. I'm never going to take away from that. But the amount of people who be walking the Ironman marathon because they got their pacing wrong, they got their nutrition wrong, they picked up an injury. The fact that their FTP is 10 watts higher than it was, the fact that they managed to shave 5 seconds per 100 off of their swim splits because they spent thousands of pounds getting one-to-one sessions in a endless pool with someone, it all falls apart if the foundations, if everything else isn't there. And so for me, I've almost stopped doing in-person coaching now because I really want to make sure that what I'm delivering is focused on giving people the best service that I can when I'm overseeing all of those aspects of their training.
And I suppose, and because it's online, and presumably, if you have people who are less abled or
Mm.
vulnerable categories or young, you could take that all into account
Yes, yeah.
in your program planning.
Yes, absolutely. When you have people who have a disability, people who have sort of an illness, if people have, for instance, I've worked with several athletes who have health conditions at certain times of the month, and those need to be accounted for into the training. You have, yeah, it really is like a blank canvas, and you really can build something around someone to make sure that you're taking all of this into account. And it's the amount of like, one of the things that I say to people is the amount of time that you can save by offloading all of that onto someone else and go, look, I haven't got much time for this as it is. If you can do all the research, you can do all the data analysis, if you can do all the planning, all of the feedback, and know that I know that everything is going to be exact, is going to be just about as good as it can be with enough feedback, then that is like if you're looking at the sort of the value proposition, be able to save somebody that amount of time is really quite powerful because the amount of hours you could spend on YouTube trying to find the answers to your questions, reading textbooks, getting things analyzed, overthinking things, it really is like offloading the admin onto someone else and letting them take care of that.
And that leads on to my next question, of course, is that there is so much material out there.
Mm.
Um, in terms of resource articles, you've got
Yep.
AI now,
Yes. Yeah.
and how and then you yourself have resources that you've
Mm.
generated, haven't you? I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
how should people balance their own research, using some
Mm.
of your research?
So
Um,
what I don't like is when an athlete, especially somebody who's got performance ambitions, is when they do nothing in the way of their own research. Just because somebody's paying me to help them, which, obviously I will do my best to help them, doesn't mean that they necessarily need to take absolutely everything that I say at face value and never listen to anything else that anyone has to say, okay? Because there is so much information out there. There's no way that I can know absolutely everything. And if an athlete comes along to me and they go, I read this about bike training, and I'm wondering if you thought if there's any mileage in that. That can be a really fruitful, really useful conversation. If somebody just does whatever it is that I tell them, then we don't improve as fast. Because there needs to be that exchange of ideas. Even if it's something along the lines of, I feel that I'm super aerobically fit, but my legs get tired as soon as I go above that sort of that LT1 intensity, that is important. That helps me to be able to influence the training. But the question with the research, now you can disappear, right down rabbit holes here. And science, just because even if you were to read a scientific paper, if even if you were to find a peer-reviewed piece of research, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, depending on the quality of the study. But it also doesn't mean that it applies to you. If your age, if your gender, if your ability is different. Most sports science studies are done on other sports science students. So they will get all of their sort of 21-year-old really fit, competitive sort of classmates, and they'll stick them on a VO2 max machine, and they'll get a reading, and they'll change the stimulus, whatever it is, whether it's nutrition, whether it's a different kind of workout. Just because something is science doesn't necessarily mean that it will work for you, especially when you can look at the actual conclusions from these papers and find out, well, yes, for 6 athletes they saw an improvement, but 4 didn't. But because there was a majority, we can say that this intervention works. So people can get blinded by science, instead of being a bit self-critical as to, does something actually work for me? Um, when it comes to AI, something I kind of ask people is, could AI do your job? And people will say, well, yeah, it could do elements of my job, but without the oversight of a human and knowing what it is that you sort of be able to understand the background, the subtext, everything, as well as taking into account your individual ability, it can be useful. But the other day, I had a call with an athlete, and we were trying to plan his nutrition for the Outlaw Full. And I said, okay, let me have a look and see what gels are available at the Outlaw. So I typed into Google Outlaw Triathlon aid station gels or something to that effect, and it came up with the AI result, which great, and because I was on the phone to this guy at the time, so I was trying to be sort of quite fast with it. I was like, okay, looks like they do orange drink, and they have a multiple flavour of gels that are available there. Then I stopped and I thought, wait a minute. So I clicked on the source they'd cited for this information, and it was a Facebook post from Outlaw Triathlon from 2012. Something tells me they're probably going to have changed their nutrition offering since 2012. So it's again, people. Oh, I asked ChatGPT and it told me this, or I got this. I asked AI and it told me this, but without being able to actually understand the reasoning behind it. Now, it can be very useful for collating information. If it goes through all of the information on the internet and it goes, we have found that there's this trend and here are the sources that brought us to this conclusion, it can save you 10 minutes of clicking around and gauging different people's opinions. But when people take it as gospel, because it sounds impressive and it very confidently tells you that this is what we do and that we're right about it, that is a bit of an issue. And Lionel Sanders, who is a very good professional triathlete, quite a popular professional triathlete, he was coached by ChatGPT over the off season. So he input his information. He's very he's a very interesting chap. He works with a coach for a couple of months and then fires them. Sorry. He goes through coaches really quickly, but spends most of his time uncoached, and as a result, he blows really hot and cold. But he got ChatGPT to help him over the off season, and he had a disastrous race at Ironman Texas, and he made a post a few days later going, I'm in horrendous shape at the moment." So I think that it's not only the cost, because if you want to use AI to write your training plan, you're going to need to go back in there and you're going to need to give it more prompts, more information, to the point at which when you're going to need to be paying at that point. If you are paying ChatGPT to write your plan or any other platform, Athletica AI is one that's a bit more sort of focused on triathlon. These actually, in the long run, end up being more expensive than just buying a plan from me. And within the plans that I write, I've got these, okay, here's what to do if you're ill. Here's what to do if you're injured. Here's how to make this work. Here's how Training Peaks works. Here's how you understand this. Here are some resources on different drills to do. Um, and the AI quite often it ends up not only being more expensive, but it also ends up being less accurate and sort of useful than something that's put together by a person. Again, not to say that, it would never work, but a lot of them you can look at the plan. It makes sense for the first 5 or 6 weeks, but the further you get down the line, it starts getting a little bit doolally. And unless you have that experience to be able to go, hang on a minute, that doesn't sound right, then people can find themselves in trouble with it.
And how does your offering, sort of compare to other coaches? Because as we say that there'll be a whole spectrum out there, some very
Mm,
good
yeah.
ones,
Oh
not very
yeah,
good.
yeah. Much better than me. Um, so I,
And what are your real key strengths? Which
mm,
what sort of people are really your ideally suited clients?
so something I've never really had much of a USP as a coach. I've never really been, I'm the person who does this. I'm the person who will help you achieve this. It's been much more a case of, look, I just want to give like a well-rounded, sensible approach to training rather than trying to be, sort of a super sort of specialist in sort of in any area or specializing this or specializing in that. Um, I've just tried to give really solid, like down to earth, grounded training rather than trying to dance around and show off how I've done this, I've achieved this as an athlete, and I'm going to do this, and making big promises that are hard to fulfill. I try to be sort of more sort of down to earth, so it is quite different for me because I don't have that. But I think one thing that makes me stand out is that I learned to swim as an adult. I remember what it's like. I've been there at the local leisure centre, thrashing up and down the lane trying to work out what on earth am I doing wrong? How do I keep swallowing water? So I understand what it takes to learn to swim as an adult. I know what it's like to not be able to understand the first thing about bikes. And I've been on that journey that most people who are looking to hire a coach have been on. I guess because I am like focused on online delivery, I think that's something else that makes me stand out in that I try to really be available for my athletes. I know a lot of coaches they'll offer online coaching and plans because they can't make ends meet simply from one-to-one swim coaching. And given a choice, they'd much rather be on poolside delivering coaching to someone than they would be sat at home writing a training plan and sending emails. And I get it. I think those are the more sort of extroverted coaches and those who sort of come from maybe more that sort of that club swimming background where to them that is everything. But for me, I've chosen to focus on the online delivery because that's where I feel that my strengths are. And also so that when athletes work with me, they know that they are my priority. That I'm not going to be not getting back to them for a few days in a row because I was just back to back with clients at the endless pool. Like if somebody sends me a message, I try to respond to it as soon as I can. And yeah, just sort of also trying to be sort of quite an open-minded coach in many ways, I think, rather than thinking this is the right way to do things and this is the wrong way, having that binary outlook on things. I try to stay curious. I try to, continue my own development. But I guess the final point that I do differently is I have this really big focus on education. I've put together different courses and resources on front course swimming, on strength and conditioning, on nutrition, on race day logistics, on all of these things that I wish that I knew when I started out and everyone seemed to assume that I knew. Put it together in affordable packages for people to buy separately or to give people when they sign up to any of my bespoke programs and to really help provide them with the knowledge so that they can go away and they can read this in their own time and they can feel more confident and more empowered to be able to feel that they can do that rather than feeling like, oh, thanks for the money, here's your plan, good luck. Really try to make people feel that they are, they're being looked after, and it's a really like well-rounded system and program.
I'm presuming you offer, people want to know more. Do you have a free session where they can
Yep.
just
So
have an initial?
anyone can book a free 15-minute call with me where they can chat to me about what it is that what their goals are, a bit about their background, and I can then share with them sort of, well, okay, here are some pointers. Here's a bit of free advice, about sort of generally how to go about things. And here's my different products. Here are the different price points. Here is what working with me, could look like. And I'll stick the link to that down in the show notes so people can find it.
I mean, maybe just sort of before finishing, zooming out, with your crystal ball, where
Yes.
do you see triathlon going? Um, between the distances, but just
Mm.
generally where it's in the stratosphere of sport and
Yeah. So
challenge.
at the moment, marathon running is having a huge moment. There are more people than ever, I think, signed up to the London Marathon ballot this year. Lots of people really getting into road running and trail running as well, which is fantastic. And we all know that a lot of triathletes are runners who decide to try their hand at cycling and swimming. And a lot of Ironman events this year sold out really early. We went through a phase from sort of 2022 to 2025. I wouldn't say the sport felt like it was dying, but where there was a definite drop off in sign-ups to races. But I think that people who got into fitness around 2020, people who um they started off they bought a turbo trainer to get fit, to keep fit when they were stuck indoors, who got into running, all these. I think that they are a number of those are now starting to look towards triathlon as being another challenge. And I'd like to think that over the next 2 to 3 years that we're going to start to see runners, because we had that sort of post 2012 boom where the sport really grew up until sort of 2018, that huge growth. I'm hoping that we'll see something similar going into sort of 2027, 2028, where people start to discover, because the challenge of the Ironman, it's an absolute classic. People see that, people watch the videos that Ironman put out and they think, I want to do that. That is, yeah, it's just everything that I've ever wanted to, I want to get that finisher's medal. I want to have the title of Iron Man. I want to achieve this. Um, Unfortunately, the sprint in the Olympic distance, they've fallen off in popularity, which I think is a real shame. Because I mean, Thames Turbo used to have 4 races; they're down to 2 now. I don't know. Obviously there are different factors associated with that. It could be volunteers and logistics and that. But I think the short course stuff is starting to fall off a bit, which I think is a shame. Um, I would like to see more people doing short races, warm up, supporting local race organisers, just getting stuck in with a bit of racing, rather than fixating simply on the Ironman brand. And there's also plenty of independent half distances, not many independent full distances. Um, but yeah, it would be. I mean, I want to see growth across the sport. I imagine most of the growth is going to swing towards Iron Man, just because their marketing is so good and the level of the challenge is there and is really powerful. What I've done, I guess, what I'm looking to change myself about my coaching and my offering is that I've always wanted to try to, because when I started out, I was absolutely flat broke. And I'm not leaning into this. Well, I mean, I know some coaches who charge sort of £3,000 a month. It's really silly money, but obviously targeted at a very specific. These are top coaches, but targeted at a very specific sort of audience. For me, what I've done to sort of try to make it more accessible, because for me, look, I've got a mortgage to pay, so obviously I need to be compensated for my time, my services, and my advice, but I'm not in it for the money. I'm not here to make as much money as I can. I really, what's sort of most rewarding to me is people crossing finish lines. Remember this chap came to me and he hired me shortly after a divorce, and we went on a journey for like 8 months to get him ready for this 70.3. He just came back and told me how much I'd changed his life and turned things around. He'd found somebody, he'd met somebody else and was dating them, but just the amount that it improved his confidence and his self-esteem and helped him move on from the messy divorce. Those are the things that really matter to me. But the way that what I'm in the process of launching at the moment and are available for people on a kind of bespoke basis if they want them, is moving towards sort of a coach training plan option where somebody signs up. They say to me, okay, I want to do this event. Like I've got a 70.3 triathlon that is 42 weeks away. Okay, give me a sec. Here's my 42-week 70.3 training plan. Are you doing it for the first time? As in, are you coming from scratch? Are you stepping up a distance from Olympic? Do you want to set a PB? Or do you want to stand on the podium? You go, oh, okay, I want to step. I've done Olympics, so I'm stepping up. Okay, here's my step up to 70.3 plan, 42 weeks long. Put it in the calendar. And they go, okay, well, how does this look? What do you think? How does that represent your fitness? And they go, well, I'm a really good marathon runner, so I really want to focus on the bike. Okay, well, let's lengthen some of those bike workouts, drop a run workout, drop that in. So rather than starting at building a plan from scratch, which is quite expensive because the amount of time that it takes me to sit there and build this plan from scratch every time, if I'm already working from a framework, that's an awful lot cheaper if I'm moving a few sessions around each week. And then each month we have a catch up. They let me know how the last month of training has gone, how the next month of training looks. We'll then change the sessions around for the following month, edit that, and we also have a coach session where we'll look at nutrition, where we might do a video analysis of their swim stroke. We could do a mobility assessment. It might be that we're talking about race day nutrition, going into an element of triathlon performance that is quite advanced, really, making sure they understand that. So it's a much more affordable option than writing something from scratch every time. And my hope is that that will make coaching and good triathlon just that more affordable and accessible for people, alongside my sort of flagship, bespoke top of the range coaching as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. And you do a lot of, I'd say this is for age-related athletes, is it?
So
Are you
it's
going
the
to try and
age group triathlon podcast. So, but basically, the idea is that a lot of podcasts that I listen to, they're all about professionals and elite athletes, which is interesting, and I enjoy listening to the interviews. But how applicable is that to my training? Probably not a huge amount, to be honest. And I think the mistake some age groupers get into is they go, oh well, this age grouper he uses this supplement, so I need to go and buy this supplement, or I need to get this special lube for my bike, or this oversized jockey wheel for my derailleur. You have all of these bits that sometimes it's just professional athletes are trying to sell. Otherwise it could be like, oh, we're going to interview Christian Blumenfeld about his 35 an hour week sort of training weeks. And look, how is that, like, it's interesting but it's not relevant to somebody who is racing in the age group ranks. So yeah, the podcast is much more about amateur athletes. It's about people like you and I, as opposed to sort of the Alistair Brownlees of the world. But once I get all of the training plans, because you got the bog standard training plans you buy off the peg from me. You've got the coach training plans, and you've got the bespoke coaching. So once I've written all of the training plans to cover all of the distances and all of the abilities, which probably is going to take me another couple of years to get them all like absolutely done, I will start including plans for those who are sort of for masters athletes as well. And for people who have like a high volume approach or a low volume approach, to help make sure that you have a plan that is sort of appropriate for those who have different abilities, different levels of sort of recovery windows. Obviously, as we all start to get a little bit older, our ability to recover from sessions adjusted. So yes, creating plans for masters athletes, it is definitely on my radar, but it's not something that I'm going to be pursuing for a couple of years or so.
I had a note before I came online. It was from a nature researcher called David Attenborough, and he said,
Oh,
could you design a program for a 100-year-old?"
mm.
Presumably you could.
I mean, it depends on a number of things, really. Because one of the things, going on to sort of age a little bit, the main issues that we encounter as we start to age is a condition called sarcopenia, which is where we have a loss of muscle mass, which can be maintained with strength work and with gym work. It's also a loss of mobility in our joints. So if you look at which comes down to the strength and the flexibility of the joints as well. So if I was creating a plan for somebody who was older, big focus is going to be on stretching, is going to be on mobility, getting people to move well. I mean, if you look at a lot of older athletes, even those who I would describe as being sort of runners, like their feet don't pick up off the ground very much. You look at them swimming in the pool, and it's a bit their arms don't really clear the water quite as well. So the focus would be on that primarily. And then, oh, I mean, someone like David, obviously, I think he's a reasonably fit guy. But I don't know how long he'd be able to sustain an effort for. So it'd be a case of, okay, well, we're going to start off with some brisk walks,
Mm.
a higher intensity you normally would, and you would slowly build that up. And if somebody has no joint issues, might be able to break it into a gentle jog. But that's all you'd really ever be able to sort of to hope for with somebody at that age. The bike, yeah, definitely. Like as long as they have the mobility in their hips to get their leg kind of round the bike and onto the saddle, then that should be absolutely fine. I mean, you see some perfectly, some guys well into their 80s who are still, overtaking me on the bike. And the swim again, nice and low impact, but with the run, it would be a sort of an alternation between a brisk walk and a jog. I think would be the best case scenario, unfortunately, for a centenarian at least.
I'll tell you what, it's been fascinating to have this conversation. I mean, firstly, I loved, reliving some of those early times
Yes.
and sharing that journey as you got into the sport. But also, I've been picking up and jotting down a few little tips along the way myself here.
I'm glad to hear it, Julian. Because I think you don't really identify as a triathlete anymore, do you?
I'm far more of a swimmer.
Yeah.
I've done quite a lot of, marathon distance swimming.
Mm.
I've done, channel relays, but I've done something called 33.3, where you swim the distance of the channel over a
Mm.
weekend.
A weekend.
So
Wow.
weekend, it's quite high intensity.
So
Um,
to give
but
you a
that
little,
has its challenges in terms of, I've got to have a shoulder op at one point, which I'm
yeah,
sure is not
yeah,
related to
yeah,
that exertion, and that links into what you're saying about you've got to be realistic as you get older as to what your
yeah,
capabilities are.
yeah. And we can achieve a lot more than people lead us to believe as we get older. Now, obviously, if somebody has an issue with their knees, with their ankles, then this is the kind of thing that can bring somebody's sort of triathlon running career to a grinding halt, unfortunately. And sometimes that just comes down to luck. If somebody has rheumatoid arthritis and that there's not much you can do about that. But just I'm afraid I'm gonna have to spin it round on you, Julian. Tell us about the channel. Give us a little 5-10 minute chat about your channel relay because it sounded like a fantastic story. I read what Sophie put up.
Yeah, that was a wonderful experience. Yes, I mean, initially, what one of the group who unfortunately couldn't proceed to be in the team because of various other life commitments, there was going to be six of us, and there transpired to be four of us in the end.
Mm,
Um, so there's a huge amount of planning. A bit like with anything else, we were lucky we had a chap called Grantley who had
yes.
the contacts, the experience to sort of do all the organisation for us.
Yeah.
And then you have to book a slot, which is always quite tricky. So we had a
Yes.
spot
Yes.
at the end of the season, and if you don't get a chance within that week you miss your slot and you're on to
Mm,
next year.
yeah.
And at the end, that week had passed, and we were ready to push it into 2026. We
Yeah.
did it in end of September 2025. And then the captain got in touch and said, the weather's not going to be ideal,
Mm.
but if you're ready to give it a go, we can go out. And we went out in the early hours, and I was the first swimmer. So, in the pitch black, to sort of just jump into the boat in
Mm.
quite choppy water, and then you
Yeah.
swim back to the beach, and you got to stand up. I messed up because I didn't realize that. So I swam, and the boat was waving it. It sent me back again to
Oh,
go,
because you
and
got
I
to
had to
start on the
complete.
shore.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got to start on shore. Um, so that the first hour was really quite heavy duty. It was very choppy, pitch
Mm.
black. Um, but we had a good team, and there was the four of us. Hugely satisfying because the weather calmed down later on, and then
Right.
it became enjoyable as against a challenge.
Only then
Uh,
did it become enjoyable.
well, and then there was a last bit where me a bit, but then a colleague, Sophie, who was
Mm.
your predecessor
Mm.
on the one triathlon. There's a point when the current really goes across you, and that you've got to blitz that. And of
Yeah.
8 boats that went out that morning, we were the only one to finish. So we felt
No.
quite proud. Yeah,
Wow.
there was 2 solos, and in that weather, that was quite a tough challenge. But there
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and for various reasons, they didn't get across. So we felt quite proud for that day.
Absolutely. I hear that Izzy had a really rough time with
Yes,
seasickness, I
it
believe.
did. But and in many ways, it's like a lot of these things. Hers was the most admirable
Mm.
contribution
Mm.
because she had severe sort of motion sickness, and
Oh, no.
was the moment she tried to stand up, she was sick.
Oh,
Yeah,
bless her.
so she spent the entire crossing uh, just laid out on the boat. Um, and then had to slide into the water. So she was actually fine when she was in the water, but
Okay.
was sick if she came back to the boat and tried to stand up.
Oh,
So, but she was great. There was no giving up.
no, no.
There was no weak links in the team. It was a great experience. Really recommend it. Really
I
recommend
have to
it.
say, I do encourage athletes to take on single sport challenges. I think that they'll just do sort of 2 Ironmans a year ad infinitum. I do think there's a lot to be said by going out and doing something a bit more left field. Whether it is taking on a big Audax ride, whether it is, doing a big like a big trail marathon, or something like Coniston, like this really huge, which I know that you did a couple of years ago. This really big challenge outside of triathlon. I think that really can help like reinvigorate that mojo and that enjoyment that you get from it. And yes,
Well,
go on.
but just you mentioned that I did Windermere actually,
Oh,
which
it's
was
Windermere. Ah,
which is a it was an 18K swim. It's quite a
mm,
long
yeah.
swim. And as you say, every different they have different challenges because on that I'd had a dog bite on my arm a week before.
Oh,
During this, I got cramp in my legs,
ah,
and so you have to adapt
yes,
mid
yes, yeah.
event, and that's what's unique and different about every
Mm.
different thing you do. But
I
as
mean,
you say, hugely satisfying.
if you look at an event like a 5K, a 10K, it's quite a controlled environment, and your performance, the majority of the time, is dependent on how well your training went, as well as some last minute decisions such as what you ate the night before, what you had for breakfast, your pacing. But if you mess it up, there's another chance probably next week that you can do to go have a crack, or next month at the very least. When you're taking on a challenge of that kind of scale, not only is this the kind of thing you can probably only do once, maybe twice a year, but you are in such an uncontrolled environment. Things will go wrong. You are going to have to think very carefully about your fueling, what it is that you're eating. It's going to be firefighting, problem solving. It's going to be battling the self-doubt that will come into your head. You know, I'm not even halfway. I don't feel I can continue. I can't go on. The feelings of isolation, of loneliness, quite often, especially with some of the like the long distance running and cycling events. Um, and it's a very different, you know, an Ironman. I want it's without wanting to take away from the achievement. I mean, you know, obviously I'm very proud, you know, of all the Ironman racing that I've done. But somebody said it's a bit more like a procession with people clapping. Whereas when you take on an event such as like an extreme tri, such as the Norseman or the Keltman or the Swissman, that becomes much more of a like off the beaten track sort of adventure. Yeah, I mean, it's just that it's a less sanitized environment. You're swimming 12 in water that's 12 degrees centigrade with plenty of jellyfish in there, and then you've got this mountainous 180k bike ride. You finish on top of a mountain. And that to me, the idea of just finishing that is more appealing than the idea of chasing this 10-hour Ironman time.
What you said there, Simon, I think is so true. Like using Windermere as an example, what the conditions are on the day, the
Mm.
wind, the chop, temperature, you can't compare one year to the next. But
Yeah,
I like that because then it's just you and the
yeah,
lake,
yep.
and just enjoy it. I mean, my advice to often people in a lot of life, not just
Mm.
triathlon, is if you can enjoy what you're doing, enjoy the challenge and the success of having done it, rather than be sometimes too overly obsessed with what
Yes,
your time
yeah.
is. Because things can happen that are outside your control.
I think there's an
But
element of maturing as an athlete, but also throughout life, where when you're younger and you want to chase the time, you want the sub 25k, you want the sub 220 Olympic, it's not that those things can stop being important to you, but they stop becoming the prime motivator. And, you know, once you've been in the sport, you know, it makes you sound like an old geezer. Once you've been in the sport as long as I have. But, you know, when you've been doing it for sort of 14, 15 years, then the actual time on the finish gantry at the end isn't super important. What's more important is the fact that you're staying healthy, you're exercising, you're getting out the house each day, you've got this sense of belonging, of community, you know, and all of this. And, you know, different people motivated by different things. If somebody came to me and said, I want to go sub 10 hours, Simon, I'm not going to say, oh, you don't need to worry about that, mate. It's not important because it is. It's a great achievement to have. But the once you're in the sport for several years, the time itself, for most people, the time itself is not motivator enough to keep going. Especially if, say, somebody does achieve a very respectable, you know, they do a 9:55. They go, the stars aligned that day. There's no point in me ever doing an Ironman again. You know, it's yeah, you know, there's no right or wrong answers, but I do believe, you know, like your motivation will change over the years, and to just sort of
yeah,
to roll with those punches and find different things to sort of motivate you long term. Because, you know, I want to help create people who have a real joy for movement and exercise rather than somebody who spends the next 30 years going, oh, I did an Ironman once.
right. I'll tell you what, Sam, I'm going to go away. I'm going to think about what event I do want to set myself for late 2026 and certainly 2027. You've given us a lot of great food for thought there. Much
Oh, I'm
appreciated.
very pleased that you found it useful in itself. You got something from it. Well, Julian, I want to say a massive thank you for giving up your Sunday morning to facilitate me chatting about my journey and my coaching. It is very much appreciated. And yes, it was nice to reminisce over the times that we spent working together to deliver the Womble and the swimming sessions and all of that, and the swim relays as well. I was thinking about that the other day, thinking about remembering coming into that, like, because I was part of I was on the team that won, and the swim who did the first leg, who started further downstream, she gave me like a 30-second lead, I remember getting in the water and thinking, I've really got to maintain this, going as hard as I can, come back into the home straight. And I sighted up and I saw everybody going, point this way. They're pointing me to my left. And I realized I'd gone completely off course and was swimming straight towards the people rather than the actual exit. Um,
Excellent.
but it was, yeah, no, those relays were great. Great. Are you still organising those, the swim relays?
Yeah, well, we're just about to put out. We're doing the next one on the 9th. I think it's the 17th of July. So if
I'm
you
going to
want to
try and
come
be
down
there,
to London,
Julian. Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely try because it's Thames Ditton, isn't it? Or around there?
uh, it's Ham
Ham,
near
that's right.
Richmond,
Ham Lake. Yep,
Ham Lake. Yeah, and it's the Thames Mariners. Um,
that's right. Yes.
I'll send you the details, and you're
I'll
very welcome.
do my best to be there.
If any
Stick
of
me on
your
the team.
if any of your podcast listeners want to compete,
Yeah.
it's very low key. It's normally invitation only, but a phase on triathlon would be good enough. So you're
Yeah,
welcome.
so if we tell you what, if you once you have the information, send it over to me and I'll stick it in the show notes of this. If somebody is listening to this and goes, "Oh, you know what? I really fancy that. That'd be great fun." Drop me an email and I will forward their details on to you for further information.
Sounds terrific. Sounds terrific.
Excellent.
Right, I'm off now for a Sunday. Go to my local cafe for a cappuccino. That's just
Oh,
what I need after the end of
that's
the session.
very civilized. Julian,
Simon, all the
thank
very
you.
best and thank you. All the
Thank you,
best.
Julian.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you once again to Julian for coming on and helping me out with this episode. It's been really helpful and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link down in the show notes for the 15-minute call that I referenced. Anyone can book that, have a chat with me about different coaching options. I'm also going to leave links to my training plans, my coach training plans. Again, they're not launched properly at the moment, so I haven't got a page to send people to. But if you're interested in that, if that caught your ear, they start from only £18 a week. Okay, the actual cost per week, it depends on how long it is you have until race day. But if you're interested, drop me an email with the title Coach Training Plan. Tell me what event it is that you're training for, and I'll get back to you with a quote. And there'll be also a link to my full bespoke coaching there if you're interested. Thank you again for your company. Thank you for listening to me tell my story. I really did enjoy it. I listened back to it whilst editing it, and it's really nice to condense the last 10 years down into a nice podcast. So, thank you once again for listening, and I will catch you all next Tuesday morning.